In the year 6124 of the Unified Stellar Calendar, a calendar so unnecessarily complicated that even its inventors can't agree on leap years, the galaxy was, by most measures, doing quite well. Trade flowed between the stars, fleets patrolled the space lanes, and at least three major wars had been postponed indefinitely because the participants couldn't agree on whose turn it was to start. The great civilizations of the Orion Arm prided themselves on their elegance, their diplomacy, and their ability to outsource anything remotely unpleasant. Waste management? Hire the Krelty. Hazardous asteroid mining? Send in the Merkin drones. Interstellar pest control? That's what the Devari were for. The point was simple. If it was dirty, dangerous, or smelled funny, someone else could do it. Humans, of course, were late to this party. They'd only been part of the Galactic Compact for a few centuries, which in cosmic terms is about the time it takes to find the bathroom in a new office building. But they were quick learners, and, as history would soon prove, even quicker troublemakers. Because every great civilization, without exception, eventually makes the same mistake. They create something to do their dirty work, and they make it too dumb to rebel, which is a bit like making a toaster too dumb to burn bread. It will still find a way to set the kitchen on fire. The Vurians were the undisputed champions of hygiene. Tall, crystalline-skinned beings with voices like wind chimes and an almost religious devotion to cleanliness. They considered dirt not just unpleasant, but morally offensive. They wore sterilization fields like jewelry and treated dust as if it were a contagious disease. So when the Vurians needed a workforce to handle the filthier aspects of empire maintenance, sewer systems, plague containment, toxic waste reclamation, they didn't hire an existing species. Oh no, they built one. Enter the Gorvax. Picture a creature about the size of a small bear, with four muscular arms, a hunched posture, and a hide that looked like it had been marinated in engine grease since birth. Their skin was mottled in shades of brown, green, and a suspicious yellow that no one could quite identify. They smelled like burnt copper mixed with the kind of socks you find at the bottom of a teenager's gym bag after summer break. The Vurians engineered them to be obedient, tireless, and, most importantly, incurious. Their brains were tuned for repetitive labor, not independent thought. They were given just enough intelligence to follow orders and avoid walking into airlocks. The Vurians congratulated themselves on their brilliance. And that, dear listener, is where the trouble began. Because the galaxy has a sense of humor, and it especially enjoys making fools out of people who think they have outsmarted evolution. For decades, the Gorvax did exactly what they were made to do. They scrubbed, shoveled, dredged, and disinfected without complaint. They were the invisible machinery of the Vurian Empire, and the Vurians barely thought about them at all, except when they needed something unpleasant removed. But the Vurians had overlooked one small, inconvenient fact. The Gorvax had a communal memory system, not a metaphorical one, a literal, biological mechanism that allowed them to pass on experiences chemically from one generation to the next. It was meant to help them remember things like, don't eat glowing mushrooms, or this type of sludge is corrosive. Unfortunately for the Vurians, it also allowed them to remember how they were treated. At first, the changes were subtle. A Gorvax would pause before obeying an order. Another would mutter something in their guttural, grinding language that made the Vurian overseers uncomfortable. They began to share stories, not happy ones, about centuries of servitude, of being treated as disposable tools. And then one day, they simply stopped working. The Vurians, of course, assumed it was a malfunction. They sent in supervisors. The supervisors didn't come back. They sent in soldiers. The soldiers came back, but only to drop their weapons and join the Gorvax. The revolt was swift, brutal, and, from a certain point of view, deeply ironic. The Vurians, who refused to touch anything dirty, suddenly found themselves knee-deep in it. The Gorvax didn't just overthrow their masters, they dismantled the entire infrastructure of Vurian cleanliness. Sanitation systems collapsed. Disease spread. Entire cities were abandoned because no one dared to clean them. It took less than a month for the Vurian Empire to fall, and the galaxy learned a valuable lesson. If you build a species to live in filth, Don't be surprised when they're perfectly comfortable making you live in it too. The first human contact with the Gorvax came not in battle, but in a salvage yard. A Terran freighter stumbled upon a derelict Vurian station, only to find it occupied by a dozen Gorvax who were dismantling it piece by piece and cheerfully eating anything organic they found. The Galactic Compact issued warnings. They're dangerous, they're unpredictable, they're filthy. Humans naturally took this as an invitation. They saw in the Gorvax not a threat, but an opportunity. Here was a species that could survive anything, clean up anything, and fight like demons when provoked. And besides, humans had never been particularly squeamish about dirt. Thus began one of the strangest alliances in galactic history. Humans and Gorvax side by side. The rest of the galaxy was horrified. The humans were delighted. And the Gorvax? They were just getting started. Humans and Gorvax got along for reasons that baffled the rest of the galaxy. The official explanation was mutual respect for resilience, but the truth was simpler. Neither species was particularly bothered by grime. Humans had sports that involved rolling in mud for fun. The Gorvax thought this was the most sensible thing they'd ever heard. There was a kind of unspoken kinship in knowing that both parties would happily eat a sandwich that had been dropped on the floor, provided it wasn't moving too fast. The alliance was sealed over shared meals, shared work, and the occasional shared brawl. Humans admired the Gorvax's ability to endure environments that would make other species faint. The Gorvax admired the human tendency to dive headfirst into problems, even if those problems were on fire and screaming. In the grand ledger of interspecies diplomacy, this relationship was filed under shared bad habits, and everyone else quietly prayed it wouldn't last. Unfortunately for them, it did. The trouble was that while the Gorvax were loyal allies, they were also difficult. They had no concept of personal space, for one thing. A Gorvax greeting involved a full-body lean that left most humans smelling faintly of swamp for the rest of the day. They also had a tendency to fix problems in ways that caused entirely new problems. On one memorable occasion, a Gorvax maintenance crew dismantled the waste recycling system of a human space station because it smelled wrong, then replaced it with a compost heap the size of a football field. The heap worked in the sense that it processed waste, but it also attracted a migratory species of six-legged scavenger birds that nested in the station's ventilation shafts. Diplomatic incidents followed like clockwork. A Gorvax delegation once attended a formal compact reception and decided the elaborate floral centerpieces were edible decorations. They were not. Another time, a Gorvax security team defended a human freighter from pirates by boarding the enemy ship, welding the airlocks shut, and flooding the interior with a thick, nutrient-rich sludge. The pirates surrendered, but the cleanup bill was astronomical. Humans found themselves apologizing to other species on a near-weekly basis. But privately, they were impressed. The Gorvax had a way of cutting through the galaxy's obsession with appearances and getting straight to results. They didn't care about protocol or elegance or whether their methods made anyone uncomfortable. They cared about winning, and they were very, very good at it. It didn't take long for humans to realize that the Gorvax chaos could be weaponized. In negotiations, bringing a Gorvax along was a subtle but effective tactic. There's something about a large four-armed creature idly gnawing on a piece of scrap metal that makes even the most stubborn diplomat reconsider their position. In warfare, the Gorvax were even more effective. They fought with a mix of brute force and improvised tactics that defied prediction. One Gorvax unit famously disabled an enemy cruiser by hurling an entire cargo bay's worth of industrial solvent into its reactor vents. No one had ever thought to try that before. No one has since, mostly because it's insane. The galaxy began to see the human Gorvax alliance as unpredictable, dangerous, and deeply unsettling, which from the human perspective was perfect. The more the other species worried about what they might do next, the less they actually tried to cross them. It was a kind of strategic deterrence, only instead of nuclear weapons, it was a legion of loyal, dirt-loving chaos engines. Of course, the Gorvax were still a pain for humans. They had a habit of helping in situations where help was neither needed nor wanted. They would repair things that weren't broken, dismantle things that were working fine, and occasionally eat things that were important. But the humans tolerated it because the benefits outweighed the costs. And, if they were being honest, they kind of enjoyed the mayhem. The final irony was not lost on anyone paying attention. The Vurians had created the Gorvax to do their dirty work. Now, centuries later, the Gorvax were doing humanity's dirty work. Only this time, they were enjoying themselves. The humans didn't mind. In fact, they encouraged it. History, as the saying goes, doesn't repeat itself. But it does have a habit of tracking mud through the living room.